Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined, they're real. A quiet subdivision in Frederick, Colorado. Monday, August 13th, 2018. The sun is up, the street is uneventful, and a two-story house sits with the garage closed and the blinds half drawn. On paper, nothing is wrong. That's exactly why first responders go step by step. The request for a welfare check comes from a friend who can't reach a 34-year-old mother named Shanann Watts. She returned from a late flight before dawn and had a medical condition that made missed appointments abnormal. Officers arrive, knock, announce, and wait. Entry is lawful and documented. The initial sweep is narrow: foyer, living room, kitchen, primary bedroom, children's rooms. No forced entry. No overturned furniture. No blood spatter. The house reads as lived in, not staged. It is a quiet scene, and that matters. What is not quiet are the absence indicators. Shanann's smartphone is located inside. Her purse is inside. Essential medication is inside. Her vehicle is in the garage. The children's rooms show normal routines, outfits laid out, small items where kids would leave them. A family's day, interrupted. Patrol preserves what they see and do not see. A supervisor confirms the threshold, treat as a missing persons case with immediate protective steps. Doors and windows are photographed. Timestamps are written down. Anyone with regular access to the property is identified for interview. The goal is to freeze the timeline before it drifts. In towns like Frederick, murders aren't just crimes, they tear at the fabric of a quiet community. The data aligned too cleanly. Sometimes that was the problem. Within minutes, a friend places a second call for help, 911, to underscore medical concerns and the break from pattern. Officers capture body-worn camera footage as they check high-value spaces a second time. They avoid deep handling. No drawers are rifled, no closets emptied. This is not a search, it is scene protection. A short list of immediate actions follows: confirm last known contact, verify morning appointments, check doorbell and nearby exterior cameras, and identify workplaces linked to the household for potential scheduling records. The first, narrow interviews begin on the curb and at the doorway: friends, a neighbor, and anyone with key access. The questions are routine and phrased to reduce contamination. When did you last see her? Did you notice the garage open? Any unusual sounds overnight? Any travel plans? Any recent stressors? Responses are logged, not debated. The classification remains missing, but the absence of essential items raises the risk score. Protocol says build the clock, then build the map. Inside, patrol notes a small set of household anomalies that are not dramatic but are operationally important. Bedding is not in full disarray, no obvious signs of a prolonged struggle, no visible cleanup chemicals in use, trash remains consistent with a normal weekend. Those details will later fit a mechanism that often leaves minimal external blood. Today, they simply hold the line between assumption and evidence. By midday, the case supervisor coordinates with detectives to widen the aperture, preserve digital devices, ask for consent to review communications, and begin a rapid sweep for cameras on the block. A neighbor mentions a camera with a partial view of the driveway. That is not for today's chapter to resolve, it is the hinge to the next. The first real lead doesn't come from inside the house. It comes from a neighbor's screen. Midday on August 13th, officers walk 2 doors down in Frederick, Colorado, and ask to review an exterior camera that faces the street and partially the Watts driveway. The neighbor agrees. Time matters, so they play the footage forward and back, frame by frame, anchored to the early morning window before most people were awake. What the camera shows is simple and specific: a pickup backs up toward the garage in the pre-dawn hours and stays there long enough to suggest loading. There's no audio worth using. The angle isn't perfect. But the motion pattern, back in, linger, pull out, creates a clean time band for investigators. They mark start and end times to the minute. They take a copy of the file and note the device make and model so they can verify the timestamp later. It's not about drama, it's about building a clock you can defend. From there, the process repeats across the block. Detectives knock, ask for permission, and either copy or document that no cameras point the right way. Where there are subscription doorbells, they request shares. Where there are none, they note gaps. The goal is to map the street like a corridor, entrances, exits, pauses, and anyone who could have seen movement around the garage. In small towns, a few seconds of video can be the difference between guessing and knowing. The team does not jump to conclusions. They use the footage to plan next steps that are basic and effective. First, isolate the vehicle, dimensions, bed length, wheel pattern, any visible decals or rack changes. Second, align footage time with any phone activity tied to the household within the same window. If the footage shows the truck in place at, say, 5:18 a.m., and a phone is idle or moves off the home network shortly after, that pairing becomes a working thread. Third, tie the thread to a real route. No speculation, just what roads a truck would likely take at that hour without drawing attention. Chain of custody stays clean. The officer who copied the file logs where, when, and from whom. A second copy is created as a safeguard. Hash values are recorded. If the case heads to court, this prevents arguments that the video was altered. You don't need computer science to understand the point. Lock what you saw when you first saw it, and be able to prove it. Back at the house, the video transforms the missing person's call into a directional search. If something left the garage, where did it go? Investigators check common outbound routes and cross-reference any traffic cameras, business lots, or city feeds that could have caught the same vehicle later. They keep expectations realistic. Most cameras don't keep footage long. Some store low resolution at night. Still, even a blurry shape can confirm a turn or a stop light cycle. A few minutes later on a nearby road tells you a lot about intent. They also look for what's not on camera. If the driveway view shows activity but the street view doesn't capture the vehicle leaving from the expected direction, that gap can still be useful. It tells you to angle your map toward the route with the fewest lenses. People who plan around cameras don't always avoid them, they often just move fast enough to make the frames unhelpful. This is where the human side of the work needs a steady hand. You have a mother, Shannon Watts, unaccounted for. 2 small children unaccounted for. A house that looks normal. A video that suggests an early morning load and departure. You present those facts, you hold judgment, and you keep moving the clock forward. The data align too cleanly, one detective says under his breath. Sometimes that was the problem. He doesn't mean the case is solved. He means simple stories can hide complicated actions. The video sets immediate tasks. Canvass gas stations on likely routes for overnight transactions. Ask for receipts or camera pulls if any were made. Check local lots that open at dawn, parks, work yards, storage areas, to see if a truck matching the profile parked longer than normal. If the household has any work ties to remote sites, list them. You are not accusing, you are narrowing a field that started as everywhere down to somewhere. By late afternoon, the driveway clip has done its job. It gives investigators a start time, a dwell time, and a reason to believe a vehicle left the property with purpose. You don't need to say more than that to move the case forward. The next step is to see whether the digital data, phones, apps, networks, lines up with that same window. When video and devices point the same way, you follow them. In towns like Frederick, crimes don't stay abstract. They land on front porches and neighborhood group texts. People ask what they can do. Here's the quiet answer that always matters. Share what you saw, share what your camera saw, and let the record speak. That record just gave this case its first solid direction. By late afternoon, the case moves from doorbells to data. Detectives request emergency preservation from the carriers tied to the household. The purpose is narrow: lock call detail records, text metadata, and historical cell site information around the pre-dawn window defined by the driveway video. Warrants follow to obtain precise logs. This is standard in a high-risk missing persons case. Speed protects evidence that would otherwise roll off a server. The first pass is timing. One adult handset associated with Shanann Watts is already documented inside the Frederick, Colorado home, consistent with the welfare check. Investigators confirm when that device last connected to the home Wi-Fi and when it stopped showing routine movement. Those local timestamps, not conclusions, create a baseline. Next, analysts chart the other household devices. They don't need content to be useful. Session starts, network hops, and tower handoffs can build a route better than a guess ever could. Carriers return preliminary cell site location information, CSLI, for the key window before sunrise on August 13th. Analysts build a simple map, tower sectors, azimuths, and timestamps in minutes. They are not looking for a dramatic line across the state. They're checking whether a device left the neighborhood and whether its early pings align with outbound roads that matter. When the first sector transition points south and then east, the map compresses possibility. It does not solve the case, it narrows it. Investigators cross-reference those times against records from the employer tied to oil field operations. Work schedules and site dispatch notes are routine in that industry, and they can confirm where an employee was expected to be on a given morning. The question is straightforward: does the device activity fall within a normal commute to a designated site, or does it reflect a detour that needs explanation? When the time bands match a known route toward a remote production location, that correlation becomes actionable. A second layer checks the home network logs. The router shows when recognized devices detached for the day. It also shows that Shanann's phone did not depart with them. That's a non-technical way of saying the person police are trying to find is unlikely to have walked away on her own with no phone, no car, and appointments pending. The detail isn't a headline. It's a hinge that turns the case from maybe voluntary to likely criminal. From there, the team pursues corroboration outside the house. They ask for traffic camera pulls on the likely corridor. Not every municipality stores overnight footage, and night frames are often low resolution, but even a timestamped silhouette through an intersection can validate the timing of a device handoff between towers. When a city feed confirms a pickup heading the right direction inside the same minute band as the CSLI, the clock tightens. When a second feed farther down the corridor catches the same shape inside the expected cycle, the route starts to look like a plan, not an accident. Analysts also query for app pings, nothing fancy, just the basic telemetry many phones produce when background services check in. If a device shows a burst of activity typical of start-of-day routines and then a period of relative quiet during a drive window, that pattern supports the route map. If there is a brief burst near a specific rural coordinate where coverage is spotty but present, it suggests pause or arrival. None of this is proof by itself. Together, it builds reasonable suspicion you can explain. At the same time, investigators move carefully with employer records. They request any site logs for early access, routine checks, or maintenance visits at the production facility identified by the route analysis. Well sites document who is on the property and when, even if the record is basic. If those entries show activity during the same pre-dawn window, that's not coincidence, it's overlap. The team secures a narrowly tailored search warrant, people, places, and things specified by time, so that any future recovery at that location is admissible. A single caution governs the room: clock control. Carrier clocks, camera clocks, and workplace logs don't always match out of the box. Analysts normalize everything to coordinated universal time and then convert to local. That prevents a courtroom argument that a minute here or there undoes the alignment. When data lines up too neatly, you verify the clocks before you celebrate the pattern. The human side matters, even in a grid of towers and timestamps. An expectant mother, Shanann Watts, isn't answering. 2 children are unaccounted for. Responsible storytelling means saying what the data shows and what it does not. The map suggests an early morning departure from the home and a route consistent with a known work site. It does not tell you what happened inside the vehicle or at the destination. That's why you lock the legal groundwork now, before memory fades and footage recycles. The route work concludes with a short list: confirm the precise rural coordinates where device activity and workplace records meet, preserve any ancillary feeds on the approach roads, and prepare personnel and equipment for a controlled search. If the next step is the field, it should happen under a warrant with a clear objective and a clean chain of custody. In communities like this, transparency and restraint build trust. Facts, not speculation, move families closer to answers. Detectives returned to the Frederick, Colorado residence on August 14th and 15th with a narrow goal. Document the interior exactly as it is and decide whether this is only a missing person's home or the primary scene of a crime. The pass is slow and methodical. No dramatics, just documentation that will hold up later. Rooms are photographed in sequence. Entry points are logged. Surfaces likely to retain trace are noted for later lab work, but the focus on site is observation, not testing. The living areas remain orderly. Furniture is not overturned. There is no visible blood or signs of a prolonged fight. That doesn't close the question, it shifts it. A clean interior can still be a crime scene if the mechanism leaves little external blood and the evidence is pattern-based rather than obvious. Investigators concentrate on the master bedroom and adjacent areas. Bedding becomes a key detail. What should be on the bed, what is actually on the bed, and what linens are in use or recently laundered are cataloged against statements. If a fitted sheet or pillowcase is missing from the expected set, that discrepancy is written down, not argued. A bag with spare linens is photographed and sealed. Laundry machines are documented for recent use, on or off, warm or cool, empty or mid-cycle, because timing there can corroborate or challenge accounts later. None of this proves violence, all of it tightens the timeline. Bathrooms and the primary closet get the same treatment. Investigators look for ordinary cleanup versus targeted cleaning. Ordinary looks like routine, towels in their usual place, cleaning products stored where they usually are, no strong odor of fresh chemicals. Targeted cleaning tends to leave edges, one area wiped and another untouched. Here, the space reads more routine than reactive. That matters because it supports an inference we will carry forward carefully. If a crime occurred, it likely didn't generate large amounts of visible blood or obvious transfer. The kitchen is logged next for food prep, trash content, and any signs of a rushed departure. Receipts and appointment reminders on counters are photographed once and left. The purpose isn't to build a personality profile, it's to anchor the day. A normal household snapshot on August 12th and 13th that suddenly stops producing normal signals is an investigative fact. Children's rooms are recorded without commentary beyond layout and consistency. Toys, small clothing items, and sleep items appear undisturbed. That observation lines up with what patrols saw on day one, a family routine that broke without warning. It also aligns with the device findings from the prior chapter: phone left behind, car in the garage, a pre-dawn window of movement not explained by ordinary morning activity. Throughout the interior, detectives protect chain of custody. Anything removed is sealed, labeled, and logged. Anything left in place is photographed from multiple angles with timestamps. They do not chase theory inside the house. They collect conditions. Later, when autopsy findings and recovered items are compared against these room-by-room notes, the house record will either support or defeat probable cause. By the end of August 15th, the working assessment is straightforward. The residence presents as a quiet scene with strong absence indicators and narrow anomalies in bedroom linens and routine timing. That combination justifies moving beyond missing persons toward a set of targeted warrants, one for digital accounts already in motion, and one for a remote oil site identified by the device en route analysis. The interior doesn't answer who or how by itself, it answers could this have happened here without leaving obvious blood with a credible yes. For investigators, that is enough to set the next step in motion. There's a human cost to this kind of precision. Families want headlines, investigators build clocks. The cleanest thing you can do for a family is protect the record so it speaks clearly when it matters. If you rush, you contaminate. If you guess, you mislead. Today's value is simple: a stable interior record that will match, or fail to match, what is found outside the home. By the evening of August 14th, the case is no longer drifting. The house record is stable. The driveway clip has a time band. The device map points toward a remote oil site. The next step is basic police work. Take statements and test them against the clock that's already built. Detectives start with people who had routine access to the Frederick, Colorado home and contact with Shanann Watts in the hours before she went silent. Friends describe the early morning return from a work trip, the missed appointment, and her habit of keeping her phone close. Those are patterns, not conclusions. The point of the interviews is to set a baseline for what normal looked like on August 12th and what broke on August 13th. They move to household statements. The questions are standardized and narrow. When did you last see Shanann? What time did you wake? What was the plan for the morning? Did anyone leave the house, and if so, when and why? Detectives don't argue. They write the answers and mark each one with a minute stamp. The room is calm because the timeline is doing the heavy lifting. Then the comparison starts. Statement: no unusual movement before sunrise. Record: a pickup appears on a neighbor's camera backing toward the garage and dwelling long enough to suggest loading. Statement: an ordinary start to the day. Record: a device tied to the household leaves the neighborhood on a route aligned with a remote site before most homes are awake. Detectives don't declare contradictions out loud, they flag them and expand the questions. Was the garage opened? Was anything loaded for work? Is there a reason a truck would be positioned that way at that time? Digital content adds a second layer. With consent and a warrant were required, investigators review recent messages and calls. The tone of the material is not the focus, the timestamps are. If a household device stops showing routine activity in the middle of the night and another device begins an early departure pattern, those two lines matter more than any opinion about the relationship. Still, context counts. Friends reference tension over finances and the strain of travel and schedules. The case remains a missing persons investigation, but the stressors explain why investigators aren't treating this as a voluntary disappearance. A polygraph is offered and scheduled. It is an investigative tool, not evidence for trial. The objective here isn't to convict, it's to separate cooperative clarity from conflicting detail. Before it happens, detectives run another pass through the home to confirm the small anomalies logged the day before, linen inconsistencies and timing gaps, so the interview can remain focused. If someone says the morning was routine, the record has to match: laundry status, bed use, device detachment from Wi-Fi, and vehicle position. One misaligned minute can be the difference between routine and red flag. Across interviews, the same approach holds. Ask simple questions once, then tighten them with neutral specifics. What time did you back the truck up is less effective than between 5:12 and 5:27 a.m. Did you move a truck to the garage and load anything? When the answer drifts, detectives return to the clock. The video is a clock. The carrier logs are a clock. The router is a clock. Together, they leave little room for a casual mistake about an ordinary morning. Detectives also collect third-party confirmations. Employers are asked to verify call-outs, scheduled starts, and whether any site visits were planned at dawn. If a person claims they left for work at a certain time and the site records show activity within the same window, that can be benign, unless it intersects with a missing persons case and a driveway video that no one mentioned. The goal is not to corner, it is to understand whether a story fits the evidence without force. One interview produces a familiar shift, a suggestion that the morning included nothing more than a standard commute, no loading, no urgency. The team keeps the tone even and pulls the route map up on the screen. The device handoffs are consistent with a south and east path, not a straight shot to an office. That doesn't prove criminal conduct, but it does make the remote site more than a hunch. With that, the case supervisor signs off on the next warrant package: targeted search and recovery at the identified oil facility. If the interior is a quiet scene, the exterior will have to speak. There is a human reality in the middle of all the clocks. Shanann Watts is 34, pregnant, and unaccounted for. 2 small children are not where they should be. Families and communities want a fast conclusion. Solid cases rarely move fast. The cleanest path is still the same: let statements stand, let records test them, and only then make moves that cannot be undone. Tight cases are built in the minutes, not in the speeches. As the day closes, detectives stack the 3 strongest points from the interviews against the 3 strongest points from the data. They match where they can. They note where they cannot. The polygraph will add one more layer of clarity, but it won't change the direction of travel. The house says quiet. The video says pre-dawn load. The devices say remote route. All of that adds up to a lawful, focused search that respects the family and protects the record. Dawn breaks over Weld County as the team stages a lawful search at an oil production site identified by the route analysis. This isn't a sweep, it's a controlled entry tied to a specific time window and a specific destination. Briefing is short: site perimeter, approach lanes, personnel assignments, PPE, and chain of custody procedures. Everyone on scene knows why speed matters, but precision matters more. Access logs and the warrant dictate where we start. A shallow grade near a service road looks recently disturbed. The first pass is documentation, not excavation, overall photos, markers set, distances measured, and a simple sketch that shows where a vehicle could have stopped without attracting attention. The soil is probed with care. When the ground gives in a way that suggests a burial, the team slows further. No one narrates guesses. Every movement gets logged. Nearby sit 2 crude oil tanks. They are tall, sealed, and dangerous. Any recovery from a petroleum environment risks chemical exposure and evidence loss, so the plan runs in parallel. One unit continues controlled excavation at the disturbed ground. Another consults with site staff and safety officers to plan a safe assessment of the tanks. Nothing is opened without the right equipment and the right documentation. At the burial site, layers come up in thin lifts. Material consistent with a bedsheet appears. It's photographed in situ and covered until it can be bagged and sealed. Items are labeled in the order they're recovered, not in the order they're noticed. A coroner is present to receive remains. When the burial yields a body consistent with an adult female, the team pauses. Names aren't spoken on site. The record has to carry the weight on its own. At the tanks, safety takes over. Vapors are checked. Ladders are secured. The first inspection is visual from the hatch. No assumptions, only descriptions: liquid level, surface condition, any visible anomalies. When remains consistent with small children are located, the coroner, investigators, and industrial safety personnel coordinate a slow extraction. Every item that comes out is wrapped, labeled, and transferred on a clean surface with a witness signature. It's clinical and quiet because there's no other option if this is going to stand in court. Back at the staging area, evidence techs mirror the interior workflow used at the house. Bags are laid out in order, seals checked, labels cross-verified against the log. Soil samples are subdivided to allow independent testing later. Any fabric is dried in a controlled space to prevent degradation. A vehicle track impression near the service road gets cast and photographed, nothing that proves ownership by itself, but enough to compare to a known tread if needed. The site diagram is finalized while impressions are still fresh. The recovery phase is not the end, it's the handoff. Transport to the coroner's facility happens under escort. Documentation goes with the items, not ahead of them. Investigators add only one line of analysis to the day's work. The exterior now speaks the same language as the interior: quiet signs, focused anomalies, and no chaos. That matters because it fits a mechanism that leaves minimal external blood and relies on concealment and distance rather than mess. It also means the home's quiet record remains consistent. There's no contradiction to explain to a skeptical audience later. For the families and the community, this is the moment when a missing persons case stops being abstract. People watching from a distance won't see the paperwork and the discipline that made this possible, only the outcome. But accountability is built in the small parts: the right gloves at the right time, the right photo from the right angle, the right line on a log sheet. If the next steps, autopsy and charging decisions, are going to be clear, today had to be exact. The recovery at Survey 319 moves the case from search to proof. Bodies and associated items arrive at the coroner's facility under escort. Evidence seals are checked against the field logs. The chain is clean. What happens next is quiet and decisive, medical exams that turn suspicion into legal elements a prosecutor can file. Identification comes first. Cross-checks include known features, dental records, and DNA comparison when required. Once identity is established, the work shifts to cause and manner of death. The approach is standard: external exam, internal exam, documentation of injuries, collection of toxicology samples, and careful notes on anything that fits, or does not fit, the scene records gathered at the house and the oil site. The adult victim presents findings consistent with manual strangulation. That aligns with the quiet conditions documented in the residence: no signs of a prolonged fight, no visible blood, and a timing gap that pointed away from a violent, noisy event. The exam also confirms a pregnancy. That matters legally. Colorado law classifies the unlawful termination of a pregnancy as a separate offense when caused by a criminal act. The children's remains show findings consistent with asphyxiation. The examiners record what they can state with confidence and avoid guesses. Each conclusion connects to a statute. Analysts now compare lab observations with the items recovered in the field. Fabric from the burial is evaluated. Fibers and trace are logged. Soil samples taken from the grave and from the vehicle corridor are retained for later comparison, if needed. Nothing is rushed. The point is to build a record that can stand alone, one that does not rely on memory or interpretation months later in a courtroom. While the medical work is underway, detectives finalize the affidavits. The interior record shows absence indicators and linen anomalies. The exterior record shows a burial and a separate concealment inside petroleum tanks. The digital record shows a pre-dawn departure on a route that aligns with the worksite. The interview record shows inconsistencies against that timeline. The autopsy adds the missing link: defined mechanisms that support homicide charges. The district attorney's office reviews the package. Prosecutors do not need motive to file, they need elements. Here, those elements are clear and numerous. The filing outlines 5 counts of first-degree murder, 3 for the children and Shanann, and additional counts consistent with Colorado's statute, plus 1 count for unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and 3 counts of tampering with deceased human bodies. The dates in the charging documents track the sequence you've been following: disappearance reported August 13th, recovery in mid-August, cause of death determination shortly after. Back at the residence, the earlier quiet scene holds up. Nothing in the autopsy contradicts the home's condition. That's important for credibility. The house looked ordinary because the mechanism involved airway restriction, not blood loss. The field recovery explains distance and concealment. Together, the records tell one story from different angles. Families often expect closure the moment charges are filed. Investigators know better. Filing is the start of a new phase: hearings, discovery, and the months of legal work that either end in trial or a plea. But this much is true: as the paperwork is stamped and date-stamped, the case now has legally recognized victims, a defined set of crimes, and a clear narrative built on timestamps, locations, and medical facts. It's not dramatic. It's accountable. There's a human reminder worth keeping in frame. Shanann Watts was 34 and expecting. 2 little girls had routines and rooms that never suggested danger. When a case reaches the autopsy stage, the best service to their memory is accuracy: nothing invented, nothing withheld. That's how the law honors people it can't bring back. In Weld County Court, the record spoke for itself. The timeline built in Frederick, Colorado: welfare check on August 13, 2018, the pre-dawn driveway window, the outbound device route, a quiet interior that fit a low blood mechanism. The recovery at Survey 319, the autopsy findings, formed a single line, not a debate. On November 6, 2018, Chris Watts entered a guilty plea to the filed counts, removing the death penalty from consideration. 2 weeks later, on November 19, 2018, the judge imposed multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole: 5 life terms, 3 consecutive, 2 concurrent, plus 84 years on ancillary charges. The order included transfer out of state for safety. As of October 26, 2025, he remains incarcerated in Wisconsin. A plea does not erase what was learned, it confirms why the investigation moved the way it did. Video fixed the clock. Device and workplace data narrowed the map. The interior record stayed consistent with a quiet method of killing. The field recovery and medical results translated facts into charges. A trial would have marched those same steps in public. The plea reached the only lawful outcome faster, honoring the evidence and sparing families a prolonged replay of details the record already proved. This story ends where it should, with names said plainly and the legal outcome stated once. Shannon Watts, 34 and pregnant, did not miss appointments by choice. 2 daughters did not wander from their rooms. What followed, search, warrants, recovery, autopsy, plea, sentence, was the response a community expects when routine breaks in a way that signals danger. Accuracy is the respectful way to tell it, no invented scenes, no alternate endings. There is a small, practical takeaway worth keeping. When something is off, phones left behind, cars unmoved, a sudden gap in a reliable schedule, treat it as risk, not drama. If you have exterior footage that captures an unusual moment, preserve it and share it. If you fear for someone's safety, document what you know and call 911. Early clarity protects people and preserves evidence. That is not moralizing, it is procedure that saves time when time matters. The case is closed in the way that counts, a single address in Frederick, a single arc from disappearance to sentence, a single lawful result. The defendant serves life without parole. The victims are not reduced to headlines, they are the reason the record exists. Thank you for following this case with the respect its facts deserve. I tell these cases to honor people, not to sensationalize pain. Here's my takeaway: when routines break, phones left behind, cars unmoved, don't wait. Document what you see, share camera footage, and call 911. Early clarity protects families. Be the neighbor who checks in, the friend who follows up. What did this case teach you about paying attention? I'd love your perspective. Drop a comment, say where you're watching from, or tell me what I missed. If this reached you, or if you disagree, say why. And if you value work like this, please subscribe to the channel for the next story.